Today I'm going to talk to you about how the Regulated Liability Network could interact with the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, or SATP. SATP is an IETF initiative to establish interoperability between disparate ledgers or states. I will start with an overview of how SETL designed and built the RLN. The RLN is an orchestrator or transaction manager that coordinates a number of ledger updates to achieve an atomic transaction of some kind. Here we show how Alice at Citi can transfer US dollars to Bob at Wells Fargo on the RLN. It involves changing three ledgers: Citi's, Wells Fargo's, and the Federal Reserve ledger. For the purpose of this transaction, we assume that those ledgers are private and use different technologies. The ledger updates we need to implement are a burn at Citi, a mint at Wells Fargo, and a transfer at the Federal Reserve. The first step is that transaction is proposed to the RLN. Second, that proposal is distributed to all participants. Third, the participants, after doing their sanctions and fraud checks, agree to the transaction. Fourth, when the RLN has accumulated all of the agreements, it sends a finality message to the participants. And finally, each participant updates their private ledger. The purpose of the RLN in this example is to orchestrate the transaction and to communicate with the various ledger owners. The detail is in what is in those messages to give the participants the confidence to act together to achieve a transaction. Now, a working assumption is that there will be more than one RLN. For example, there could be one in the UK and one in the US. For the RLN to be a useful model and not just a collection of silos, there needs to be a way of a transaction spanning different RLNs. And this is where the gateway comes in. To take it a step further, there could be many RLNs, each using different technologies. At SETL, we call these settlement domains. In this model, there's a need for a general protocol which provides for settlement between ledgers that exist in different domains. For this, SETL has published a protocol. You can see that at rln-ip.org. The key principles of that protocol are as follows. A domain is a collection of ledgers. This could be an individual bank or a collection of organizations by jurisdiction or purpose, such as members of a central clearing organization or depository. The tech behind the domain is opaque to the gateway. It should work with any kind of network of ledgers. Gateways themselves decide who they trust. This is important as we did not want any global central organization to intermediate between settlement domains. This would be technically and organizationally cumbersome. Gateways make a point-to-point connection. That is, there is no global network that needs to support the model. And gateways relay messages on behalf of ledgers. A ledger being a collection of entries that is controlled by some identifiable entity or person. The purpose of the gateway is to relay those messages. Insofar as ledgers in other domains need to rely upon those messages, they should be from identifiable sources and cryptographically signed. This implies a common PKI for all parties in a transaction, but not necessarily a global PKI. Finally, we did not seek to impose a transport layer on gateway connections. We considered that to be part of the settlement domain's agreements between each other. In Internet terms, that is further down the stack. Our core aim here is to establish a protocol which software developers can use to code. To be frank, the more products that use a common protocol, the more valuable each product is, including our own. With this in mind, we took a look at the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, as we could see that on the face of it, it has very similar aims to ours. What we found is very encouraging. It is a smart group of contributors who recognize the same needs as we do. Having said that, it's not a perfect match. And here I'll identify 3 key differences between SATP's current state and what we think is needed. I must stress that SATP is a live project and will evolve over time, so nothing is set in stone. First, SATP is focused on an interaction that operates only between 2 gateways. RLN transactions can take place between many ledgers in many gateways. However, we think we can work with this by collecting many SATP interactions into one atomic packet. Second, the current draft of SATP strictly limits the interaction to a mint in one network coupled with a burn in another. This is only one of the myriad paradigms that are needed for a fully functional gateway on the RLN. Even amongst one-way transfers, this does not cover many of the different ways of achieving a transfer, like wrapping, for example. Third, and perhaps most surprising to us, SATP requires that gateways hold assets in escrow as part of a transfer between 2 networks. This is antithetical to our idea of a gateway being a postbox for messages and there being a strict demarcation between actors on each network and the gateway function, which should not act as principal in any transaction. We're trying to encourage the group of contributors to drop this as a mandatory feature. Overall, we are really very encouraged by SATP. We're happy to contribute to it as a standard. To sum up, we do not think that there will ever be a single ledger that records everything. We consider any change of ownership of anything to be a collection of ledger updates. Networks of ledgers already exist, and we expect more to emerge by jurisdiction or by some other common purpose, such as clearinghouses. We think a standardized gateway between networks is the way to achieve interoperability. And finally, SATP has the potential to be that connector, but it does require us all to pitch in and make it workable. I hope you found this interesting. Leave me some comments below and I'll try and get back to you. Thank you very much.